Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, as you can tell from the background behind me, I'm not in my regular home studio at the moment, and so the audio quality is not going to be quite as good. There'll probably be a few extra background noises that you don't normally hear, and the lighting's not quite as up to spec as it usually is. So please forgive me and bear with me. I also should point out at the start of this video, because this video is in response to something that Pewdiepie said in a video that he made a couple of days ago. I'm actually a fan of Pewdiepie. I am a subscriber to his channel. I like some of the content that he produces. I'm a big fan of. I particularly like his subversive style of humour. And I am also, I guess, an admirer of the way in which he stood down the media juggernaut that came for him some months ago over that whole Wall Street Journal scandal, and when he really stood his ground on that and didn't cave and in a way that sort of was, I guess, showed a lack of moral fibre and spine and backbone. He actually stood his ground. He said his sorries, but he also stood his ground and continued to challenge where he needed to challenge. So, that said, a couple of days ago, Pewdiepie released a video which was a book review of several different books that he's read lately. And by the way, it's a good video, it's well worth checking out. And one of the books that he reviewed is Jordan Peterson's new book, 12 Rules. And Pewdiepie's review is actually good. He's very, he got a lot out of the book. He talks very favourably about the book. But then at one point, he makes the following comment.
And I didn't realize until the very last chapter. I was like, he's religious. I thought he grew up in a Christian household or something like that. And the reason that he drew a lot of religious analogies was because to prove the point that we always knew about this, or maybe this is something that we've known for thousands of years through this biblical text. Whenever I look at self-help, I can't help but feel a bit critical. Like, what is this, some sort of cult book or something like that? And finding out that he was religious in the end, it sort of changed my perspective on the book. It made me look more critically at the rules, which I think you should do anytime you get advice about how to live your life.
Now, at the time of watching this video, I found myself a little bit frustrated by this comment, and to me, it's reflective of something that is a bit of a problem in our society, particularly in the West, when it comes to being open to outside ideas, being willing to delve more deeply into the truth, and to, I guess, examine reality and the things in life that really matter in a more critical and deep kind of way. And it's this problem of effectively looking at the message and then dismissing the message based on who the messenger happens to be. And in this case for Pewdiepie, it was the fact that he found out that Jordan Peterson is religious. And so all of a sudden he goes back, and this colours his view of what, up until that point, he thought was some pretty good wisdom that he'd been receiving, just because it happened to be coming from a source that he has been culturally conditioned to think badly about. Now, Pewdiepie, to his credit, he's quite honest about the fact that in his video that this shouldn't really be the case. And it's also a very mild version of this problem that he expresses in his video. But I felt it was worth talking about because there is a lot of this that goes on in our society, and in a lot more extreme forms than what we see Pewdiepie expressing here. A big part of the problem is this extreme tribalism that exists at the moment in society, and the way in which dialogue has broken down as a result. We have sort of broken into our various tribes, our various identities. We hold so closely to the groupthink, and we dare not entertain ideas that come from, not necessarily just from outside the group, but even more so from perhaps people who our group has identified as the enemy, who must be fought against and overcome. And to me, this is a really dangerous thing. And it is a really dangerous thing because what it means is that you are actually limiting, you are narrowing your scope of inquiry, you are closing your mind, you are limiting your possibilities when it comes to accessing and delving deeper into the truth of how things are and the way they are, and you're actually robbing yourself of all sorts of potential and important insights in life. For me personally, I don't care who it is that is delivering a pearl of wisdom. What matters to me is whether or not what they are saying is true, whether or not there is evidence to back up what they're saying, whether or not what they are saying is reasoned and good and true. And if it is, when I encounter a moment of wisdom like that, my first thought is not, well, this person's an atheist, or this person's an agnostic, or this person's a Buddhist, or whatever the case happens to be, and I don't listen to those groups, so I'm going to ignore or be skeptical about everything. Instead, my first thought is, wow, that's a really fascinating insight, or I'm glad I've learned something new, or I need to put this into practice in my own life. And that's why I read widely. I listen widely to lots of different sources. I read widely. I myself am not an atheist and I'm not an agnostic, but I listen to good, reliable, philosophically sound atheists and agnostics. And I'm open to receiving wisdom that they might have discovered that's going to benefit me. I mean, it's to my benefit that I'm actually open to that wisdom and not closed just because they don't happen to be part of my group. I am open to people who are outside of perhaps the religious tradition that I'm part of, because if they've got good insights that are worthy of hearing, you see, there is no monopoly on the truth in this way. There's no one group that can say, well, we're the only ones who have figured it all out and we've got the truth, and anyone else should not be listened to because we're the only ones with the truth. Truth is, those big fundamental truths, the objective truths, the things that are real, the things that are good, that are beautiful, and that are worth knowing, worth delving deeper into, worth putting into practice in our life. They are objectively true, so they're going to be universal. And it means that you don't have to be part of a particular group to stumble upon or to discover or to have a truthful insight about something that's good and important that the rest of us should all learn from. Let me give you an analogy to explain what I mean. Imagine you've got a Catholic neighbour who lives across the road from you, and it's 3 a.m. one morning and your Catholic neighbour knocks on the door and you're not a Catholic, and he says to you, there's smoke pouring out the back of your house. What's your first reaction going to be? Now, if your first reaction is to say, oh, hold on, aren't you a Catholic? I'm going back to bed because you're a Catholic and I don't really trust Catholics, I don't really listen to what they have to say, so I'm just ignoring you and I don't believe you. You see, if that was your first reaction, that would be completely irrational. That would be absolutely irrational. The only way that would be a rational response, possibly, is if your neighbour had continuously and repeatedly lied to you about smoke coming out the back of your house for some other nefarious reason or because they weren't perhaps mentally right in the head. But that's not the case in this scenario. And it would be foolish, absolutely foolish of you to say, well, I'm not interested in hearing what you have to say just because I don't like who you are. Instead, what you would say, if someone came to your door, your Catholic neighbour from across the road knocked on your door and it was 3 a.m. and they said there's smoke pouring out the back of the house, what's the first thing you're going to say? Well, a reasoned person is going to say, show me where it's coming from. Or what do you mean? You inquire more. Effectively, you're asking for a more enlightened reasoning. You're asking for greater evidence. You're asking for something more because, this is what a reasoned person does when they are presented with something that matters. And the same is true, I would argue, when it comes to those big ethical questions, those big metaphysical questions, those big moral questions, those big existential questions, those questions about reality and the way things are, the human person and what really matters in this life. And it shouldn't matter what the source is. If their wisdom is sound, if their reasoning is sound, if what they are saying is true, then we are absolutely irrational and foolish to dismiss what they're saying based on who the messenger happens to be. In actual fact, this is not just something that's problematic for our society, and it's why I think a lot of dialogue has broken down, because we've just retreated into our tribal trenches and we stay within our groups, and it's such a big problem. And instead of actually listening to wisdom, we would now much rather laugh at and even abuse people who are different to us, rather than listen to and engage with the arguments and the evidence that they're putting forward. And we really can't afford to be doing this. I think we're at a critical time, particularly in the West, where we need to be examining the important ideas more deeply and thinking more critically. And it is absolutely foolish of us to be excluding religious voices from the public square and from those discussions, particularly when you think about something like, say, I'm a Catholic, and Catholicism has been thinking about some of these big existential and ethical questions around the human person, around the family, around meaning, etc., for 2,000 years. That's a lot of time to be unpacking and reflecting and philosophizing about issues. And you think that in that time, there might be some really important truths that, regardless of what your particular religious or non-religious or ideological persuasions happen to be, that you could actually learn from and benefit from. And so surely it's in our best interest to actually listen and not to shoot the messenger. It's not just a societal problem, it's actually also a logical fallacy. It's I guess technically referred to as argument ad hominem, which is where instead of listening to the argument and the reasoning and responding to that, you just attack the person. You attack the messenger and ignore the message. And it's a very convenient way of not actually having to listen to the message if you don't like what you're being confronted with. Instead, you just get to call the messenger a name. Sometimes people refer to this as label and dismiss, the fallacy of label and dismiss, where you label someone with a name and then you dismiss them and then dismiss their argument without ever having examined it or even responded to it. And it's a logical fallacy because you're not actually responding to the truth or the falsity of what they're saying. You're just calling them a name and then ignoring what they have to say. Like I said, Pewdiepie, to his credit, and this is a good video, I'll put the link in the description below, you should watch his whole video, it's good, there's some good books that he reviews as well. And to his credit, he's honest about this. This is a very mild form of this problem that he expresses in his video, but it's a problem that all of us can fall prey to. And one of the ways I think we avoid falling prey to this problem is by making sure that we maintain connection with a wide group of sources, that we are reading widely, that we're engaging widely, that we have connections and relationships with people beyond just our particular philosophical or religious worldview. And in doing that, I think we are maintaining an openness to the possibility of learning truth and profoundly important truths from other sources that we might not previously have even considered. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Please let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And if you love the content I'm making and you'd like to see more of it, then please support my channel on Patreon. There is a link in the description below and there's a link on screen now. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Left Foot Media.